Good afternoon and welcome to our Fresno County and City Republican Women Federated August Luncheon. We want to thank Supervisor Nathan Magsig, who is scheduled to be our in-person speaker this month, but obviously we had to be on the fly and be flexible, so we're glad that he agreed to come and do this interview with us so that we can still hear some of the great things that are going on in the county, some of the challenges that are going on for our Board of Supervisors right now, as well as other things that are going to be of interest to our members. So again, we thank you all for joining us, whether you're a member, an associate member, or a guest on our Facebook page. We welcome you, and we want to thank you for taking this time to hear from Supervisor Nathan Magsig. Again, Nathan, thank you for joining us. I think it's safe to say it's been an interesting few months here at the county. Probably not what you exactly signed up for, but could you give us a little bit of background and even a little mini history lesson on how COVID came to Fresno County, how things kind of unfolded as you were learning about what was going to be required, and just a little bit of those kind of early months of what it was like here dealing with this?
Happy to do that. And Diane, I want to say thank you for giving me an opportunity to share with the members of this group. And I really appreciate you and the time that you've taken not only to work with the Republican women, but also to be involved on television, just educating the public on things that are going on and giving a clear and concise conservative perspective through this pandemic and on many other issues. I think it's important for us to remember our values, and you have represented us well.
Thank you.
So to talk about the pandemic a little bit and how we got to where we are today, really in late December, this virus was impacting Wuhan, China. And this was something that our health department was paying very close attention to. Even though we haven't seen a truly major pandemic to this magnitude in about 100 years, we have had SARS and MERS outbreaks, and our health department was involved with those over the years. But with COVID-19, it was a little bit different. How Wuhan was handling this, how China was handling it. I remember looking at information where different sectors of the China economy were being completely shut down, and you could see that just through activity and really heat blooms there in these cities that were shutting off because everybody was being locked inside of their homes. And so there was some early discussion about what's going to happen if China is not able to contain this virus within and it begins to spread globally. And so late December, early January, our health department began to strategize about what happens if we get an outbreak here in Fresno County. And so they began to take a look at a lot of the plans they had, making contacts with different folks, contacting the state, and just strategizing and planning. And then you fast forward from January to March, when, of course, the state really started taking notice, and we started to have a few cases here in California. New York was being impacted significantly, and if you recall, in Europe, Italy was being decimated.
Right.
And looking at Italy's population, they have a lot of people who have pre-existing conditions and who are elderly as well, and this virus really can take a toll on those with pre-existing conditions and the elderly. And so, as many as 8 to 10% of people who were being infected and tested positive in Italy were passing away early on, and so that was very concerning to us here in the United States. So California in March really started ramping up efforts. We got our first case here, and within that time frame, you may remember that the governor basically shut the whole state down. Schools were closed in a matter of a weekend. Kids were told to go home, and the governor talked about how this was just going to be, we need to flatten the curve, just 2 weeks, and we'll really try to get ahead of this virus. 2 weeks turned into 2 months, 2 months turned into 6 months, and here we are today. And the Central Valley, we've seen some spikes in our cases here, but some positives that are happening that you don't hear a whole lot about is the death rate from the virus has really dropped dramatically. We're under 1% death rate, and that is of those who we know, of those who have tested positive. We know that there are many people who have gotten the virus, who haven't been tested, who've recovered at home. And generally speaking, this virus, if you're a healthy person, it's going to run its course with you, but you're not going to need to go to the hospital. You'll be symptomatic for a few days, but after that you'll recover. But of those who've tested positive, as of yesterday, it's right around 21,000 people going back to March, and the death rate currently stands at about 203 people. So you can see that, again, of those we've tested and we know that are positive, the death rate of that group is under 1%.
Right. And so that number would actually shrink if we were able to calculate how many people had actually had the virus but were never tested and come into that number.
I've read some research from the CDC. There are some groups out there that believe that the virus is 10 times more prevalent than what we're actually testing. Mm-hmm. So again, we don't know exactly how widespread the virus is. I've spoken to some people who believe they had the virus mm-hmm. earlier. Of course, there are antibody tests that are out there that some people are taking. A lot of those antibody tests are not recognized by the CDC simply because their accuracy is not high enough mm-hmm. for the CDC to recognize some of those antibody tests. But again, the virus is here. The county is working very diligently not only to keep our employees safe, but to keep the public safe. We've started a number of programs where we're purchasing personal protective equipment, masks, face shields, gowns, gloves. We've created a network. We've connected all of our hospitals together. And in the past, really, our hospitals have competed with one another, which is great. I support competition. But in a pandemic like this, we need to lift each other up, support each other, and then find out where there are gaps and then bridge those gaps. And really what the county's been trying to do is with personal protective equipment, where hospitals need N95 masks and they're unable to get them through their channels, we're working with the state, we're working with other vendors as well. And just to the community hospital system, I believe we've provided over 100,000 N95 masks. Our agricultural department also has plugged in with the farmers and farm worker community here in Fresno County, and we've handed out over 1 million masks to those frontline farmers and farm workers. So again, we're just scratching the surface on some of the things that the county has done, but the county has been very proactive to do what we can to help our businesses, to help our agricultural sector, to help our hospitals, and to the fullest extent possible, keep everyone here in Fresno County safe.
What are some of the challenges of kind of overseeing this type of thing in a county with the diversity that this county represents? You were mentioning the farm workers and that obviously we have Fresno as kind of an urban center and some of those spread out through the county, but when you're trying to come up with a county-wide plan, so to speak, what are some of the challenges of handling the vastness of the county? It's a huge area, and the differences of the needs of the rural versus urban areas.
Great question. So right off the bat, the federal government stepped in and intervened, and I need to give a lot of credit to President Trump, because early on President Trump, number one, eliminated flights from China here, and so that really slowed down the spread of the virus here. If you look at other parts of Europe, Europe and China are very closely connected, and China did not stop flights flying outbound from China to Europe, but they did stop train traffic and flights internally, mm-hmm. and so that's a whole nother discussion. But anyways, European countries were being impacted significantly. The president in January saw that there were issues, cut down traffic from China, direct flights, and even some other international flights into the United States. He was criticized heavily by many of his detractors out there. That helped to slow the spread of the virus. But again, some of the challenges here in Fresno County, the federal government came up with the CARES Act, and the CARES Act gave money to large cities and counties, of which we only have one city that qualified for CARES Act funding, and that's the city of Fresno. And the county, because of its size, Fresno County got money too, roughly $81 million, and the city of Fresno got about 92 or 93 million. But the other 14 cities that we have in Fresno County didn't get any direct allocations. And so you talk about the vast size of Fresno County. It's 6,000 square miles, 15 cities. You have rural and urban, and the needs run the gamut here. We've got mountain communities, right, and we've got valley communities, and so agricultural sector, construction sector, service sector. And so challenges immediately were first and foremost dealing with politicians. So you have all these different council members, mayors of these different cities, Fresno getting a lot of resources, the county getting some resources, but the need being great. The city of Fresno is only about 120 square miles, and they got the largest allotment. And so we sat down early on with the council members in the city of Fresno to kind of try to figure out how we can work together. Over areas of homelessness, I would say we worked very well together. We deployed a strategy where we were able to create 500 new beds to bring the homeless, who are amongst some of the most vulnerable, many of them off the streets and into shelters. And city and the county, you didn't hear a whole lot about that, but we worked together and shared in the cost to do that in the metropolitan area. We also reached out to Selma and some of our other more rural parts of the county to create new bed space too for the homeless. So I would say we did that well. Where unfortunately, where there's been some challenges here, about a month or month and a half ago, you may recall at the federal level and state level there were some representatives, Democratic representatives, that became very critical of the Board of Supervisors, saying we weren't spending money fast enough, we didn't care about farm workers, we weren't being transparent, were some of the things they were saying. And so it created really a course for us here at the county and for these representatives to kind of collide. And over the course of several weeks, there were some debates that took place. Information was presented. There was a meeting that took place between the city of Fresno and the county where we discussed how we're spending our dollars, and at the end of the day it became very clear, looking at California and all the communities that received CARES Act funding, the county of Fresno really was north of the median and even doing better than the city of Fresno, outspending the city 2 and even 3 times the amount of money compared to what the city was. So the narrative did not match reality. But again, the problem with that is this is time that we could have spent working together and collaborating. So even during COVID, unfortunately, there are groups that are politicizing it. And we could be doing so much more good if we really wanted to focus on reality, truth, move away from narratives, and really try to identify how can we spend these dollars to have the greatest impact. Here at the county, things that we're focusing most on, personal protective equipment. We need that for our businesses, for our hospitals, here at the county, for our workers to keep people safe. Contact tracing. Some people are kind of split on the importance of contact tracing, but the reason that I believe it's important is when you do have a breakout, it's important to isolate those who've been exposed to the virus, because the virus is incredibly contagious. And so we need to identify who has been exposed and then make sure that those people that have been exposed don't develop the virus. And if they do, they're given the resources they need to fully recover. So PPE, contact tracing, and then of course testing. We have gone from only being able to do 50 tests a day to doing as many as 2,500 tests a day in Fresno County. And the tests are expensive, and the state has come in to help us with resources. We've created 2 different testing sites, Fresno City College and the community of Sanger as well. And then we have many different testing sites that local doctor providers are doing, medical providers are doing for people as well. So right now we're averaging about 2,200 tests today, but we can go to 2,500 if we need to. So those are the things that are most important in my opinion. And I've said this before, there are so many needs right now during this pandemic, and the resources we have are not going to meet all the needs. And so we have to be focused and strategic, because we are running a marathon with COVID. It's not a sprint.
Let me ask one question on the testing. What is our turnaround from test to results? Because I know that's been an issue in different communities across the country, where if you test at one point but it takes a week to get your results, it's almost worthless because who knows what you did or were exposed to in the intervening time. So what is Fresno County's turnaround as far as testing results?
There's no one answer that for that question, so I have to answer it a couple of different ways. Hospitals have the ability to do testing, and they have laboratories on site. So for hospitals, if someone needs to be hospitalized and they get a COVID test, the turnaround time is a matter of hours. If someone is sick and they go to their doctor to be tested, and that test is sent away to a lab that might be Quest or another lab that's outside the area, We've heard stories where some of those tests could take as long as 10 to 12 days to get back. So part of the challenge is we do have some laboratory capabilities here. Those folks that are ending up in the hospital, we have the capability in Fresno County to turn those tests around quickly. But the general public who are getting sick, that are getting tested, some of those tests that are going to outside laboratories are taking far too long. And part of the problem with that, and we're working to remedy that right now too, but part of the challenge is all the laboratories are overwhelmed because there's so much testing taking place. And you can't just order a new machine and then run more tests, because the machines require certain materials, substances that can only be used to run those tests, and those materials are in limited supply. And if you don't have that material, you can have the machine, but you can't run the test.
Right.
And so there's all these factors that limit turnaround time. So making sure that we're more efficient, finding ways to ramp up production of this material that's needed to run the test. And by the way, the president has been working very hard to do many of these things, and he's not being given credit for working with businesses to help them retool their operation lines to make PPE, but the president has been doing that. But we need to be doing more of that here in California. So we are working to turn around tests quicker for the general public. So that has been an area where we do need to improve.
So in some ways, the increase in testing that was kind of demanded by the public, the increase in testing has actually caused a crimp in the system, because the laboratories are overloaded by all of these people wanting to get tested, and they may or may not be a good candidate for testing.
Correct. And so if you may recall, the benchmark that we placed for ourselves in the beginning was to get to the point where we were doing 1,500 tests a day. Well, we blew past that benchmark, and we got up to the point where we were able to do 2,500 tests a day. Well, there's 58 counties in California. They're all doing testing, and you can get to the point where you're testing too much.
Right.
And the test is only good for that moment in time when it's taken. Someone can take a test, be negative, 2 days later be positive. We saw this in our jail here because we've always been doing testing in our jail, and about a month and a half ago there were about 24 inmates, I think it was, that were transferred to a prison. They were tested a few days prior to their transfer, all negative. But as soon as they got to the prison, I want to say half of them tested positive. And then of course we had the issue with the outbreak within our own jail. So we need to be strategic with how we test. We shouldn't be testing for the sake of testing. But one thing I want to share with all of your viewers right now too is things that we need to look for as we test is the positivity rate. And right now in Fresno County, of those that are receiving the test, roughly 12% are positive. We want to get that number under 8%. If we do that, and we also get to the point where we are under 100 positive tests a day, and right now we're averaging over 300 a day, that will trigger an opportunity for the governor to give us permission to open our schools again. So we're working very hard to get these numbers down. Our restaurants need to open. I look at our barber shops, beauty salons, many of which are operating outside and inefficiently, because really those services need to be performed indoors. My goal is to get our economy moving again as quickly as possible, and we can only do that to the extent that we've got PPE, we've got our contact tracers out there, and we're doing strategic testing.
Let me go back, we'll kind of shift into a school conversation, but you mentioned a certain state legislator who had come and was questioning the county a little bit and how it was spending its dollars. And I think it was the exact same week that happened that I heard our Fresno Unified School Board president comment that of the allocated funds to school districts from Sacramento, they hadn't seen a dime. And so it seems like maybe that legislator would have been more useful trying to take care of things from a state level to get those funds down here to our school districts and other entities. Because as you said, when it all kind of came out in the light, the county was doing a pretty good job and was actually ahead of the city of Fresno in spending dollars and allocating, but also being fiscally responsible in reserving that money for who knows what's yet to come and where those dollars would be needed, come September, October, and beyond. Did you see some of that as far as who should really be handling what issues, and sort of an idea of like, hey, stay in your lane, buddy.
Well, I think you're right. We all have a role to play in this pandemic, and I'm one who believes in local control. To the extent that you can empower our school boards more, our city council members more, boards of supervisors more, at the local level, we are closest to the people in delivering services. I've always used a statistic that I believe roughly 80% of services that people rely on, whether it be flushing their toilets, running their sprinklers in their front yard, walking on sidewalks, driving on roads, all of those things, calling a police officer, firefighter, those basic services are provided by local government. So, but really there is a role that the federal government, state government, and local government plays. And to your point, really the state legislature needs to be more engaged, in my opinion, doing things at the state level. Early on, the state legislature really gave up a lot of their authority and empowered the governor to create general laws. They gave him spending authority, and he's used that authority as one person to basically paint California in a very uniform way. But again, this virus is impacting the valley, it's impacting Fresno County differently than it's impacting some of our northern counties, or even southern counties. And so to me, our local health officers are better situated to be empowered to make the calls that are best suited for our local regions. But back to the state legislature, the legislature could be involved in assisting with allocating funds, passing legislation, streamlining and making things easier for us at the local level. If you look at the state constitution, I believe it's Article 11, when it talks about how cities and counties are constituted, really the state creates laws, and that's the role of the state legislature, and then counties and cities follow those rules. And so the legislature needs to be involved, and I see them as really being facilitators for us, making things easier for us at the local level to operate. But as long as they're kind of sitting on the sidelines and empowering the governor to do some of these things, we have lost our local representatives at the state level.
Right.
Even though the governor's elected statewide, there's a role that assembly members and state senators play. They're elected to smaller regions to represent the specific needs of the population they represent, and really that's been limited in this pandemic.
So it seems like one thing I noticed and I thought was really great, you know, we talk about local control and who's closest to the people, is in the restaurant example where they were allowed to open and then numbers got wonky, and so Newsom shut them down again, everybody has to go outdoors. And I saw the individual cities kind of taking the lead of saying, okay, look, we're going to try and help you figure out how to get outside. You know, we're going to ease these regulations, these restrictions that are in place. And then, you know, similarly, the county has had some of that going across, and it almost seems like we need that trickle up sense where I'd like to see our state legislature doing some of that, recognizing areas where legislation, regulations are impeding some of these abilities for our businesses and other places to operate under COVID regulations. And again, then that would trickle back down and be even more helpful to our county, to our cities, and to our businesses. Is that kind of an accurate?
I think it's very well said. And so to kind of double down on some of the things that you're talking about. So we're in the middle of a pandemic, and right now we're experiencing extreme heat. We've got rolling blackouts. So we've got one challenge after another. One of the things that that the state legislature could do right now is suspend AB 32 and some of this greenhouse gas legislation that's out there, and find a way to, look, we need power, we're in the middle of a pandemic, we need to suspend AB 32 and SB 375 and some of these other pieces of legislation which limit us in our ability to generate power right now. And I say that and how it's connected to COVID. There are only so many battles you can fight simultaneously. And really the state of California, because of its policies and because of some of its laws, it's always made it difficult for businesses to survive. Well, now you've got COVID-19 on top of that, which is crushing everyone, and you have all these policies and legislation which it's having a doubling down effect, which is really impacting jobs and our economy. And the legislature right now, through the stroke of a pen or initiation of legislation, or the governor could do an executive order, could suspend that to keep our lights on more because right now the ISO, Independent System Operator, has said we don't have enough power to keep lights on in people's homes. When it's 110 outside, I don't know how you can shut the air conditioner off, especially for a senior citizen, maybe that lives in a in a mobile home. Those mobile homes get very hot. To me, it's a health and safety issue. So, to your point about how at the local level we've taken steps to try to be innovative with ways that businesses can operate outside, the legislature too needs to become innovative, suspend some of these things that they've done to help us through these difficult times.
Let's finally shift to schools a little bit here. Again, I see the vastness of Fresno County and its diversity, and again, the idea of local control in these different school districts, knowing what their capabilities are and what they aren't, what their access to Wi-Fi is, what it isn't, what their students' real needs are, even in terms of socialization and mental health concerns outside of the classroom setting and those kinds of things. So what is the county doing in terms of trying to empower these school districts with these different needs, even up to Fresno Unified, Clovis Unified, who obviously have more resources and opportunities to utilize distance learning, but how do you kind of put all of that together with such a large umbrella?
So really Jim Iovino, who is the superintendent of Fresno County Schools, has been working to really align all of the schools together to come up with plans. But you're right, all school districts are very different. I think Fresno County has 32 different school districts, and that doesn't even take into consideration some of the charter schools that are out there, private schools and the like. So really, what is the county doing? We are trying to provide personal protective equipment, information, of course, technical assistance to these schools to the extent possible. But really right now, there is zero flexibility when it comes to schools being allowed to open. The governor's order about a month ago made it very clear Fresno County is in a high hazard region, and our schools have to be closed. So at the local level, we really cannot, beyond that, we can work with schools to come up with plans for what it will look like when they're able to open up again, but we can't give direction or guidance or help them open in defiance of the governor, which is frustrating again, because being someone who believes in local control, we need to be able to call our own shots. I believe that parents need to be given choice on for what they believe is in the best interest of their kids. And if schools can demonstrate they can open up, they can social distance, have kids brought back together, in my humble opinion, I believe those schools need to open. And I think about some of the kids that attend our public schools. I was speaking to a parent this morning. He has a son who is either a quadriplegic or paraplegic, and has mental challenges as well. And his son needs to learn from a teacher that has the ability to physical touch as part of the learning process for his student. And there are many students who have autism or other disabilities where you can't sit in front of a computer and learn. You have to have someone present with them. So special accommodations need to be given, because you cannot paint the learning process one way and expect to get the same result. Everybody is built differently. Everybody has different gifts. And even in a pandemic, at the local level, we need to be empowered to make those one-off calls so we can keep the public safe, but also make sure that our kids are learning. There is a balance with COVID. COVID is real. It's impacting people who have pre-existing conditions, but at the same time too, the decisions that policymakers are making at the state, local, and federal level are having a lasting impact on people's mental health. At our board meeting yesterday, we were talking about that with the Department of Public Health, and that is not being talked about enough. People are committing suicide over the fact that they've lost a job, they can't go back to work, they can't pay their bills. Kids need to have contact with peers and with teachers. That is the best environment for kids to learn in. But we're not talking about the impact of limiting the ability of people to interact with one another. All we're hearing is if the virus, if one person carries the virus into a group, it spreads, and it does. but we need to be having both conversations simultaneously and coming up with solutions that merges the need for contact and also to keep people safe.
So you and I both have students in Clovis Unified, and I really felt you talk about parent choice, and I really felt like what Clovis Unified did at the end of last school year and leading into this one with a lengthy process of trying to figure out what was going to be best to meet the needs of the parents, the students, the entire community, and that seemed to me like the perfect concept for local control. Understanding the needs of your district, the parents, what they wanted, but giving them options. So like you say, students who may be at risk or students who may come from a home with an at-risk person have the option to do distance learning and be 100% online. But maybe parents who both work outside the home and need to be able to go to work, they were then given the option of doing in-person education on the campuses. And it seemed to me like that was a great way to go, to give those choices, to offer protections for teachers and families that needed them, but also the other choice. But the thing that frustrated me most recently was in these last few weeks as kids have been going back to school, on the heels of finding out that our campuses are closed down, we're also being sent information about government subsidized vouchers for daycare services, where our kids are being told, hey, come to this location, bring your distance learning, we'll have adults there supervising you while your parents go to work. Why is that not capable of being done in a classroom setting?
Great question. I don't have a good answer for you. So all I can say is there are people suffering. My office is getting calls constantly from parents who have students that need their kids to go back to school. And you said it perfectly, so really there's nothing more that I need to say in regards to all of that, other than as a parent of 3 sons, 1 who's in junior high and 2 that are in high school, I see the importance, the value of getting our kids back to school, and I believe that we can do that safely. And there was a survey that was done in Clovis Unified, and I think it was over 70% of the parents who participated in that survey said they wanted their kids to go back to school. And there were some who had maybe kids with pre-existing conditions who wanted to do the distance learning. And Clovis Unified created a pathway for both.
Right.
And so having that local choice is important and necessary, and it's what our country was founded on, is individual liberties and freedom.
Right. So let me wrap up with a more philosophical question, if I can. What would you say you have learned, or what's kind of your perspective as we've gone through this unprecedented pandemic time, the role of government as it should be, as it is, and maybe as it could be? What have you seen from this, whether it's been an engagement and interaction from a federal to state to county to city levels, or just a more broad concept of what is it we really need government doing for us? What does it do well? What does it not do that well? And what can we kind of learn on that front moving forward?
Well, I believe that government is necessary, but the best government is the government that operates small. And where government needs to be the strongest is at the local level, because it's closest to the people. And the way that I see government is the same way our founding fathers believed in it, that government is there to serve the people aren't there to serve the government. And what's frustrating to me, some things that I've seen, is there are many, many people who are wholly dependent on the government. And government was never created to supply housing, food, and everything else for people. I believe that nonprofits are better suited for those types of things, because government is just a construct that takes resources and then it's good at building things. We need roads, we need bridges, we need sewer plants, water plants, we need public safety. Government needs to focus on those types of things. And then government also, to the fullest extent possible, needs to be limited and not growing into other sectors where I have a personal responsibility to take care of my family and my neighbor. And I believe as a society, as government has grown, some of the things that maybe we did 100 years ago, where our churches were more involved in providing food and housing and meeting the needs of the poor, government has attempted to grow into that space. And from my perspective, government has not done a good job there, because really that's my job. And it's the job of my church. And so I would like to see, as a community, us to step forward, take on that role more. And I would like to see government to shrink back and focus on the things that it really was created to do, and that's infrastructure, that's public safety, and just get back to the basics.
So what, as far as the pandemic specifically, would you say government has done well?
Sure. So here in Fresno County, I give tremendous credit to the employees that we have working in our health department. They have found ways to network our hospitals together, public safety services together. They've created inroads with the state and made those communication links even stronger. And so our health department really has been a bridge to all these different sectors that were necessary to deal with this pandemic. So as hospitals are being impacted with surges, or caseloads of those have gone up, that information is being relayed to us. We're relaying it to the state very quickly. And so I would say our health department has done a fantastic job in regards to that. I give a tremendous amount of credit to our sheriff, our district attorney's office, and we've got 19 department heads here from social services. I am very impressed with the work that all of them are doing. You have seen in the news about how the courts have ruled that there's a $0 bail. The governor is releasing prisoners out of our prisons. The sheriff's hands are really tied, and she has to follow these orders. But Fresno County is working very hard to make sure that the bad elements, the bad actors that are out there, they're being arrested, rebooked again very quickly, and employees here are working twice as hard, and you're not hearing them out complaining. They just want to do their job. They want to keep people safe. So I give a tremendous amount of credit to the people who work here for Fresno County, our department heads, the line staff. I've been very impressed, and I believe that everyone in this county can be proud of the employees that serve them.
Great. One final question, because it is kind of all COVID all the time, but a lot of us have COVID exhaustion. Tell us one thing that's going on in the county that has nothing to do with that, but is really exciting.
Exciting. Well, there are over 50 named lakes in Fresno County, and if you haven't been out to one of them, I'll tell you, I was out at Pine Flat Lake this last weekend. So things that are exciting, go to Shaver Lake, go to Huntington Lake, Pine Flat, Millerton, go to any of those lakes, Sequoia Lake, and you will have an exciting time. So don't forget about those things that are in your own backyard. We've got incredible trails. We have some of the biggest trees in the world. We have the deepest canyon in Kings Canyon in North America. So I'm glad you asked me about what's exciting about Fresno County. We've got Boyden Cavern. So if you're looking for things to do and you're locked in your house, you can go into your own Fresno County backyard and rediscover it, and you will find that the beauty of this county surpasses any other in the entire state, and you don't have to go far to have fun.
That is true, and you should follow Nathan Magsig, Supervisor Magsig, on Facebook, because he will take you on those adventures in videos and that. He's really great at showcasing the beauty of not only District 5 in Fresno County, but the entirety of the county. So again, Supervisor Magsig, I want to thank you so much for your time in enlightening us and sharing with us the challenges but the successes that you guys have seen here at the county in terms of this pandemic and the response, and how you continue to work and move forward to get us out of this situation. And we really appreciate your effort on behalf of our businesses, on behalf of our families and communities. And again, we want to thank you all for tuning in to this interview. We hope it shared some important information with you. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to ask us, and we'll do our best to get them answered for you as well. But thank you so much for joining us here at the Fresno County and City Republican Women Federated August Luncheon. We hope you enjoyed it, and stay tuned. We'll have more of these coming in the weeks ahead.